Well, as you know, the Dokusan room is a sacred space where there's a conversation between teacher and student that is confidential on the part of both parties. But sometimes a theme emerges in these talks that calls for a Dharma Talk. So this is one of those Dharma Talks. Bodhisattvas in the marketplace. So when you make the decision to practice zazen, to enter the Buddha's way, you may have some idea that you will become a calmer and kinder person. You've become uncomfortable in your life, and you realize something has to change. So you bring yourself to the zendo and you step onto the path. And you discover that, darn it, practicing zazen does not make you kinder or calmer, although it might have that side effect just in passing. Zazen disturbs you. As Reverend Master Jikyo said, you are disturbed by the truth, with a capital T. You begin to notice how you are not kind. You cannot maintain your equilibrium, how you fail to adhere to the precepts and the teachings, or even to what you profess as your own values. Zazen shows you who you really are, and you cannot pretend anymore. You are disturbed. In taking up an alternative way of being in this world, you also disturb others. You begin to notice that you have less in common with your friends, with your colleagues, and family that are not following a spiritual path. When you talk about your spiritual path or your emerging values with them, they give each other these sideways glances or laugh uncomfortably, or the ultimate insult, call you an idealist. Old habits and distractions lose their attraction. You look around and wonder, I'm feeling isolated. What am I going to do now? You may begin to talk with your spiritual friends about feeling split. Part of you wants to snuggle back into that comfortable world that you knew before you began Zen practice. But part of you longs to expand into the freedom of liberation. Something is driving you forward into the practice of enlightenment, into seeing things as they really are. And this drive is so powerful that it cannot be ignored. You are disturbed by the truth, with a capital T. In the Buddhist tradition, there's an often repeated phrase that describes this condition. That phrase is leaving home life behind. In Shasta Abbey's translation of Ancestor Dogen's Shobogenzo, the translator explains this phrase. Leaving home life behind has a double meaning. In one sense, it refers to someone who becomes a monk upon taking the monastic precepts. In another sense, it refers to the renouncing of the mundane values of worldly society, and as such would apply not only to monks, but also to those who have accepted the lay precepts while remaining in lay life. So contrary to what one might think, it is possible for lay people to leave home life behind, and taking the precepts as part of this process. Accepting and keeping the precepts involves examining one's attachments and desires, examining one's values, examining one's behavior, past and present, and becoming a more open and authentic person. The changes that happen as part of this process may be disturbing, especially to those who have known us best, our parents, our friends, our partners, our children. Because we strive to practice zazen in every aspect of our lives, your loved ones practice with you. Each morning we chant, "I will wear Tathagata's teachings," and likewise in the Bodhisattva vows, we vow to become the Buddha way. As you carry out these vows in the marketplace, you become noticeable. The Buddha's way is a radical practice. It is contrary to the tendencies and practices of Western culture. Western culture takes as its motto Descartes' proclamation, "I think, therefore I am." The Buddha's way says, "I think, therefore I am deluded." So in becoming the Buddha way, you become a disturbing person. This is truly an alternative way of being human in this world. In Shukkei, the 81st chapter, Shobogenzo, on leaving home life behind, Dogen Zenji says, this leaving home life behind turns us upside down. It is the turning of the wheel of Dharma. In the Shukkei Kudoku, the 82nd chapter of Shobogenzo, on the spiritual merits of leaving home life behind, Dogen quotes the eminent ancestor Nagarjuna, speaking over 1,500 years ago about leaving home life behind. Nagarjuna says, "Those in lay life have all manner of duties and occupations. If they should wish to concentrate on pursuing wholeheartedly the path to full awakening, then their family duties will fall by the wayside. And if they should wholeheartedly fulfill the responsibilities of family life, then matters that pertain to the pursuit of the way will be abandoned. They would need to be able to practice the Dharma without selecting one way and abandoning the other. And this is what I would describe as taking on what is difficult." So Nagarjuna feels you from 1,500 years ago. He understands that it's a really big balancing act to practice as a lay person. So I read that last piece again. They would need to be able to practice the Dharma without selecting one way and abandoning the other. This is what I would describe as taking on what is difficult. And a little later, he talks a little bit about all of the activities that go on in the home and how that's very difficult. So Nagarjuna has sympathy for you in the task that you've set yourself in becoming a Zen practitioner and leaving home life behind as a layperson. He recognized the difficulty of juggling lay life with wholehearted pursuit of awakening. Dogen Zenji recommends that we find good spiritual friends to support us in leaving home life behind. You who are now learning the way, he says, must keep close to morally good friends and be on intimate terms with them. What we call a good friend is someone who asserts that Buddhas do exist and teaches us that there is wrongdoing as well as happiness. One who does not deny cause and effect is considered a good friend and a good counselor. What such a one gives expression to is the true teaching. To think about this principle is to think about what is good. To act in this way will be to act in accord with the Dharma. So in leaving home life behind, we know that the Sangha treasure is one place where we can find such friends. And our teacher is also a source of support in sorting out the obstacles we may encounter. I've also been fortunate enough to develop deep friendships with people of different faiths that I met during my graduate program. Even though my friends and I have very different approaches to practice sometimes, the roots of our deep friendship lie in our mutual appreciation for spiritual practice, our valuing of that, and our ability to talk to each other about things that most people just really aren't interested in. We turn to each other for support and encouragement when one of us encounters difficulties on the path. Because from our point of view, we're all on the path. We may just have different side ways that we are going on. An ancient Zen master said, "The world has no hold on you. Whatever has a hold on you comes from your mind. Don't let your mind force names on you. Where do you think delusions come from? When delusions no longer arise, the true mind will fill you with knowledge. Just let your mind be. Don't try to control it anymore. This is called the ever-present, never-changing Dharma body." So there's two things that I talked about in order to support us in leaving home life behind. One of those things is good spiritual friends, and the other piece of it is recognizing that our mind is dragging us around. And if we're making a problem out of this dichotomy, if this perceived dichotomy, then we need to look at what's going on in our mind. What's happening in there? Why are we feeling so disturbed? As we leave home life behind, while we are renouncing the mundane values of worldly society, we still embrace everything that comes toward us with the mind of zazen, this open, uncontrolled, ever-present awareness that is non-discriminatory, not picking and choosing, and yet joyful and friendly. The more we practice zazen, the less separation we perceive between ourselves and others, between the life we leave behind and the life of the Buddha's way. Our practice is a gift that we bring into our home life, our work life, that may inspire others to walk this path as they see how zazen transforms us. Some years ago, someone told me they were attracted to Zen practice after their first visit to Olympia Zen Center because of the shining faces of the Zen students as they came out of the Zendo. And she said to herself, I want that. Those shining faces, your shining faces, are the aspect of those who have left home life behind. This is not an easy task that you set for yourself, even as recognized by Nagarjuna. But it is a worthwhile task. Leaving home life behind is the only task worth doing in this dusty world. The urgency of that task grows every day. As the evening Gata says, let me respectfully remind you, life is short and opportunity is lost. Each of us must strive to awaken. Awaken. Take heed. Do not squander your life. I had some other words that I was going to say today, but I think I will keep them for another time. I wanted to allow some time, and we have about 15 minutes to talk about this topic, because it seems to be rather a warm one, if not hot, right now. So questions or comments?
Thank you, Jikyo-san. In the beginning, when you were talking about practitioners entering zazen, hoping or thinking that it's going to make them a kinder, gentler person, I don't know if anybody else saw this, but at that moment, that flower fell. And it was like an exclamation mark. And so Dogen Zenji's classical Genjo Koan describes that in the midst of practice and realization that flowers fall even though we long for them, and weeds spring up even though we would rather they didn't. So I thought, this flower fell, and it was a nice little Dharma punctuation, exclamation mark. But in the context of this discussion, so just that notion that everything that's going to happen is going to happen. So it won't change even ourselves in the ways that we may want. But towards the end of your talk, you did use the phrase that transformation through zazen, or something along those lines. So can you describe that transformation, if not making us into a different person who we think we need to be, but how transformation comes about maybe in other ways?
Well, I can only speak from my own experience, of course. What I've experienced is that I'm a little less likely to go off the deep end when something annoys me or upsets me. And so maybe I'm lying about it, not making you a kinder person. But I think it takes a while. because one inevitably has to spend a lot of time in retreat looking at one's past actions, which are so cringe-inducing. And so you really get your face into what's important and what's not. So I think as you begin to understand that the kinds of things that our culture emphasizes as important are not important, and the kinds of things that are emphasized in the Buddha's way, like compassion, kindness, mercy, equanimity, all of those qualities that we talk about when we're talking about Buddhism, that they're really important. So, just for example, when I run into somebody who's having a really bad day at the cash register and they're really grumpy, I'm always very kind to them, because that is what I would want someone to be for me. Whether it makes any difference in that particular interaction or not, it's just becoming the person that you would like other people to be to you. Oh, good grief, then we get to the whole do unto others, and that's really what it is. So I think over time, all of those things just kind of burn away. All of those irritations and you start to have different goals in your life. Perhaps you don't see so much. You aren't so focused on really making a lot of money. You begin to decide that just having enough is good enough. You give more of it away because so many people are having such a terribly difficult time right now. So you become more generous. You become more open, I think. You become less defensive, less mean and nasty. Because you just don't want to go there. You've seen in your zazen, looking back at those things that just come up in zazen, you've seen how unproductive such behaviors have been for you in the past, and so you start to change things. So that's just some of my experience. It's not like it happens overnight. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of hard work on the cushion to actually make a difference. Yeah, Mickey.
I would like to speak for the flowers as the one who puts them up there every week. What is the purpose of flowers? It's not to look pretty on the altar. It's to fall. Next week, when I come back, every one of those will be dead, and some of them may be dead tomorrow. And that is the purpose of flowers, to fall. They are a teaching of impermanence, especially our own impermanence.
Thank you, Mickey.
Thank you.
Yes, Bill.
your reflection about the process that happens through practice, not because we want to be a certain thing, but because the Dharma manifests over time as we yield to it, reminded me, I've just been reading this book, Opening the Hand of Thought.
Oh.
Do you like it? Okay, we'll talk about that later.
I think I've read it 6 times.
Oh, well, I have really been enjoying it. And at the beginning, the teacher, I forget the name.
Uchiyama Roshi.
Yeah, he talks about the process whereby sweet persimmons are grafted. So you can get a sweet persimmon or an astringent, kind of, tart, bitter persimmon. And the thing is that the sweet persimmons don't grow as a tree. You have to graft a branch onto an astringent tree, something like that. And then over time, that graft, maybe you graft the astringent branch onto the sweet persimmon. Anyway, it's a really cool metaphor. And it feels like this is what we're talking about. This, we choose to become grafted to the tree of the Buddha way. And then over time, this, on a cellular level, we sweeten.
And it takes 100 years for persimmons.
So time swiftly passes by.
Yes. Tavi.
Thank you. Thank you, Mickey, for the flowers. They're very beautiful, and that was a very beautiful metaphor you made. Thank you. Being someone who's relatively new to the practice, I experienced the exact thing that you spoke about. I was like, did I ask Jikyo about this? I was like, is this inspired by me? Because when I first started, I was expecting to feel a sense of relief from anxiety, to feel more at peace with myself and with others. And I experienced a lot of frustration because I felt like that's what was supposed to be happening and it wasn't. And I was like, I'm meditating, I'm practicing, I'm going to the center. Like, why am I still anxious? Why do I still have cyclical thoughts? However, you also mentioned slightly in your Dharma talk, there's a sense of awareness. So I feel over time, even much so, my awareness will begin to then create that transformation. Because now I am more readily aware that I'm becoming anxious. I'm more aware of what's not bringing me peace or disturbing me. So I think that is the most helpful thing. Zen practice opens that awareness, and I believe you touched on that as well. But having just experienced that, I kind of laugh because I'm like, oh, well, at least every time I know when it's about to come up, when those feelings are about to come up. And definitely Zen has helped with that. So thank you.
Yeah, good. Yes.
Thank you. As we practice, sometimes it feels like there is a river between believing and wanting to believe. And I am at different times on different sides of that river. And that has been disturbing. And in sitting and taking an inventory of the cringy things over my life and looking at where they are and kind of allowing the light in there instead of keeping them far away in a dark box in the basement buried. It feels like that gives me a way to get closer to getting all the way on the other side of the river because I'm not carrying so much baggage. But I feel like I may never get all the way to being fully in. And so it becomes a matter of faith and just acting as if sometimes. And that's a little frightening to me.
Well, I think you put your finger on it, because really there's nothing to believe. There's only being there. And that does require some either faith or just pure cussedness to continue. And or it's that longing, that bodhicitta, that drive towards awakening that keeps us on the cushion. And really, there's nothing to achieve either. So it's just learning how to be present in this very moment, always. And that's really all there is. So we can make these narratives for ourselves about what's happening, but that's just words, it's just language, it's just thinking. The reason this practice is so radical is because it's beyond language. I've been reading, and I was going to talk about this a little bit. I've been reading this book by Bill Porter, Zen Baggage, which some of you may have heard of before. It's his travel log, it's his recording of his visit to the temples of the Zen ancestors, the first 6 Zen ancestors. And what's really cool about that is that they're still there, or they've been rebuilt and the sites are still there. And what was really radical about Zen when it came to China was this very thing. That it's just sitting, it's just being here. That's all it really is. And it was just a radical form of Buddhism that came to China with Bodhidharma. And it was a really important change in practice. And the fact that that practice has continued for these thousands of years, continues to be passed on, is just kind of really, it's really astounding to me that we've survived. And sometimes it goes way down and you think it's gone altogether, but it's never quite goes out. So even under communism in China, it still survived. So that's really important to remember, that it's just this practice of zazen that is the most important thing. And we can talk about all the other aspects of the Buddha way, which are very valuable, but it's this one thing that we focus on is just zazen. Just zazen. That's the tool. Anybody else have a burning question?
Well, if I may, I would just add, there are 3 words that are considered sort of tenets of Zen Buddhism that come up to me when my practice gets a little shaky. And those words are faith, doubt, and determination. Faith, doubt, and determination.
Thank you.
That sums it up perfectly.
So I'm going to read you a little poem that was given to Bill Porter, whose Dharma name is Red Pine, by the abbot of the temple where Bodhidharma first came ashore in China. And he said, "Layman Red Pine, when your mind dwells nowhere, no corrupting thoughts arise. When you don't cling to the world, suffering and joy have no place to grow. Every thought you think becomes the cause of life and death. Understand impermanence and find your ever-present body."